Hey everyone, you ready to jet set? Well, kinda. Today we're heading to those islands you always hear about, you know?
Yep.
The ones that sound like paradise, but you always wonder, what really goes on there?
Tax havens.
Yeah, exactly. You guys sent in a crazy interesting video about how the super rich use these places. Like, I always knew it was a thing, but this video, eye-opening to say the least.
Oh, it's a rabbit hole for sure. But once you get past the whole secrecy thing, it's actually pretty fascinating stuff.
Okay, see, that's what gets me. The sheer amount of money involved. This video mentioned the British Virgin Islands, right? Tiny islands, but they're holding like trillions of dollars. Trillions with a T. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's not all just like yachts and endless margaritas like some people think. It's way more strategic than that. So before we even get into the HOW, let's talk about the WHY. Like, why even bother with these havens? Is it just about dodging taxes entirely?
Well, that's where it gets a little tricky. See, there's a big difference between tax avoidance and tax evasion, which the video explained really well.
Right. One's totally legal and the other not so much.
Exactly. Think of it this way. Imagine you're driving and there are two toll roads. One's pricey and the other's way cheaper. Obviously, you're going to pick the cheaper route, right? Totally legal, just smart. That's kind of like tax avoidance you're working within the system to pay less.
Okay, I'm following. So what's the not so legal version then?
Tax evasion is like if you just hop the barrier on the toll road altogether. You're straight up breaking the rules.
Makes sense. Okay, so back to the havens. How do they fit into all of this? Are they just places with zero taxes?
That's part of it, for sure. But the real key is how different countries approach taxes in general. There are two main types, territorial and residence-based. Territorial basically means you pay taxes where you earn the money, no matter where you actually live.
Okay, so like if I made money in, say, France, but lived in, I don't know, Canada.
You pay taxes in France. Residence-based flips that you pay taxes where you live, regardless of where the money was made. So in your example, you pay in Canada.
So let me guess. This difference is where things get interesting for people using tax havens.
You got it. Remember Lao Wang's milled pea shop from the video. Let's say Lao Wang lives in a residence-based taxed country but sets up his booming milk tea business in a low-tax territorial one. He rakes it in but only pays minimal taxes back home.
Whoa. It's like finding a loophole in the system. Smart, but kind of feels like they're playing the game a little differently now.
That's the thing about tax havens. Totally legal, but definitely raises some ethical eyebrows.
Okay, so we've established it's not just about escaping taxes completely, but why islands, though? Specifically, places like the Caribbean. What's the draw besides, the sunshine and beaches?
Well, that's where we get into the real meat of it. The thing that makes these places so attractive, especially to the super wealthy. And honestly, it's probably not what you think.
It's all about privacy, right? Like, we're talking Fort Knox level secrecy, but for money.
Bingo. The video actually used Shakira as an example, remember?
Oh, yeah. That whole thing with her taxes. But it wasn't just about Luxembourg having low taxes, was it?
Nope. It was about what the video called layers upon layers of shell companies. Starting in the Bahamas, if I remember correctly.
See, this is what I don't get. It's like you can just create a company and poof, your money disappears. Is that really how it works?
Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. But essentially, yeah. Places like the British Virgin Islands, they're practically famous for how secretive they are. You set up a company there, your name doesn't have to appear on any of the records.
Wait, serious?
Seriously.
Yeah.
And it gets better. Remember the video mentioned those strict secrecy laws? They've basically got your back. You can even hire directors who live there, just to make the whole paper trail even more convoluted.
So you're telling me these ultra-rich folks can basically make their money invisible?
It's like an invisibility cloak, but for your finances. Pretty wild, right?
Wild is one word for it, but honestly, it feels kind of not sketchy. Like, where's the line? When does smart financial planning cross over into, something shadier?
That's the million, or should I say billion-dollar question, isn't it? And it gets even trickier when we're not just talking about individuals anymore. The video touched on how entire companies use these havens. Chinese companies especially.
Right. They're listed on U.S. stock exchanges, but they use this whole other structure. Something about red chips. I'll admit, that one went over my head a little.
Okay, so imagine this. You've got a box, right?
Yeah.
But inside that box, there's another box. And maybe even another one inside that one. Layers upon layers. That's kind of what a red chip company is like.
Okay, so where do the havens come in?
It's all about where those boxes are, you see. You've got the actual company doing business in mainland China, but then they've got a subsidiary in Hong Kong. And finally, the company that's actually listed on the U.S. Stock Exchange. That one's incorporated in, you guessed it, the Cayman Islands.
So it's like a Russian nesting doll of companies all leading back to the main one in China.
Exactly. It helps them navigate all sorts of international regulations and attract foreign investment, too.
And they choose the Caymans or one of these other havens for that sweet, sweet anonymity. But then the video mentioned small red chip companies like Bilibili, which is huge in online video, and this VIE thing. Now that sounded seriously complex.
Oh, yeah, VIEs.
Yeah.
Variable interest entities. Definitely a mouthful.
More than a mouthful. Break it down for us. How's it different from the regular red chip setup?
Well, some industries in China, like online stuff, they've got these rules about how much foreign ownership is allowed. So a small red chip company, they can't just copy-paste what, say, Lao Wang's milk tea shop would do to be on the stock market.
Okay, so how do they get around that?
That's where the VIE steps in. Instead of owning the company outright, they use these super complicated contracts and agreements. It's a way for the foreign company to still have control, still get the benefits, but without technically owning the whole thing.
Clever girl. But man, with all these layers and loopholes, doesn't it feel like the playing field is, a little tilted? Like, is any of this actually fair?
That's the question a lot of people are asking, especially when you look at cases like the Adani Group. The video definitely didn't shy away from those accusations of manipulation.
This is where things get kind of juicy, right? I mean, the Adani Group, that's straight out of the financial thriller section.
Yeah, the video didn't mince words when it came to them.
Not at all. It sounds like it goes way beyond just, like, finding creative ways to pay less tax. Straight up manipulation they were accused of.
Basically, yeah. The video claimed Gautam Adani, he's the head honcho, they said he used a bunch of shell companies, many of them connected to his brother.
Trying to keep it all in the family.
Right. To shuffle money around without anyone noticing.
Yeah.
Like a magician making things disappear, but with millions, billions, who knows how much.
And the whole point of this disappearing act was to make their stock prices go through the roof.
You got it. They were essentially creating this illusion, making people think it was way more demand for Adani Group stocks than there actually was.
And that's where those investment funds in Mauritius come in, right? That little detail the video dropped about those funds handling a ridiculous percentage of Adani's stock trades. Like, way more than usual.
Oh, yeah. 30%, wasn't it? A massive red flag right there.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, the video was saying those Mauritian funds, they weren't really independent investors.
More like Adani's accomplices in this whole scheme.
Exactly. By controlling both sides of the trade, they could jack up the price, make it look like the company was killing it.
When in reality, it was all smoke and mirrors.
Pretty much. And we're not talking about chump change here. This was billions, with a B, allegedly being moved around, all using these tax havens as cover.
And the best part, when the whole thing blew up, it blew up big. The video said Adani lost, like, his richest man in Asia title almost overnight. Karma, right?
That's one way to put it. I mean, it just goes to show, these havens, they might offer secrecy, but they're not above the law. Eventually, things have a way of catching up with you.
So, okay, we've gone from Lao Wang's milk tea to Shakira's shell companies to potential corporate schemes. That escalated quickly.
That it did. But hey, that's why we do these deep dives, right? To unpack this stuff.
Exactly. But I gotta ask, this all sounds pretty high level, Billionaires, corporations, shady dealings. What does any of this have to do with, like, normal people?
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, this whole tax haven system, it exists in the shadows. And who benefits from that lack of transparency? Probably not the average person just trying to run their business or invest their savings.
That's a good way to put it. It's like these havens are just one piece of a much bigger puzzle.
Absolutely. And the more we learn about how it all works, the better equipped we are to ask the right questions. Like, do we need stricter regulations, more transparency, or is this just the cost of doing business in a globalized world?
Deep stuff. And speaking of deep, that little teaser at the end of the video about UGA and those BVI trusts sounds like another rabbit hole waiting to be explored.
Oh, definitely. Maybe we save that for our next deep dive.
For sure. Until then, everyone, stay curious and keep those questions coming. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.